Right then, Jujutsu Kaisen Season 3 is less than 3 months away from its official release, and yet we still have no information at all about what to expect. Like, how many episodes will it be? How many manga chapters will it cover? How many episodes is part 1? How long will we have to wait for part 2? Will Gojo be unsealed? Will Yuta be confirmed as a Sukuna level threat equal to Goku? Okay, chill, I'm just kidding, okay, I'm just kidding. There's no way Gojo will be unsealed. Most of these questions aren't going to be answered until the season has been released, at least not by any official source, because that's not how these things really run. Which is why I decided to go through the entirety of the Culling Games chapter by chapter and break it down into 23 or 24 episodes of anime. By using Mappa's historical data, such as how season 1 and 2 were divided up, I think I actually managed to reach a pretty damn good estimate of exactly how many chapters season 3 will cover, what episode each fight and hype moment will actually be in, as well as what the difference between part 1 and part 2 will be. Oh, but first, please remember to like the video and subscribe because we are so close to 30k. Honestly, if this video flops, then I might have to resort to just like, selling feet pics or something. And trust me, nobody wants that, okay? And if you're one of those freaks who are commenting right now about how you want my feet pics, then still like the video so I can afford a camera or something. Anyway, let's get right into it. Jujutsu Kaisen Season 3. Yeah, I can't wait. It's probably gonna be divided into 2 different parts, with the first part set to start releasing weekly in January 2026. Oh my god, I cannot believe it's that soon. Wow. So yeah, the first 2 episodes are actually releasing as part of a compilation movie with the final 2 episodes of the Shibuya incident, and that will be releasing in November or December, depending where you are. But for the sake of, maintaining my sanity, I'm just gonna focus on weekly releases. Some people think it will be a 12 episode by 12 episode split between part 1 and 2, with part 2 likely to release 6 months to a year after part 1. But based on the info we currently have, that is actually very unlikely, and I really do not think that's the case. I have a feeling most people think it's the case because that's how other anime and other studios tend to run stuff, but Mappa with Jujutsu Kaisen historically don't tend to behave like that. It's good news though, don't worry, because I do think part 2 will actually begin much sooner after part 1 than you think. JJK Season 2 was also split into 2 different parts. The Hidden Inventory arc, which is 15 chapters in the manga, was released as 5 weekly episodes, but after it was done there was a month-long break before part 2, the Shibuya incident, started airing. 15 chapters, 5 episodes, 1 month break. Now, the Season 3 teaser trailer for part 1 shows everything from Naoya's introduction, Yuta versus Yuji, the gang talking to Tengen, and finally Maki annihilating the Zenin clan. But not a single thing beyond that point. There was absolutely nothing in this teaser beyond Maki versus the Zenin clan. And that made me decide to go and count how many chapters there are between the start of Season 3 and the end of the Zenin massacre, and sure enough, there are exactly 15 chapters. I then split the chapters up and realized they fit perfectly into a 5 episode format, the exact same as Season 2's Hidden Inventory arc did. Which means part 1 is likely 5 episodes that cover the execution and perfect preparation mini arcs, and part 2 will likely be the rest of the season as the official Culling Games arc, releasing a couple months later. All the evidence points to this being the case, so I'm gonna go with that for now because the historical data shows that this is what's gonna happen. I could be wrong, obviously, this entire video is just one big estimate, but yeah, that's what I think is gonna happen. Weirdly enough though, Season 3 Episode 1 was actually the hardest one for me to figure out because the final episode of Season 2 actually skips all of chapter 138, and the final scene is Yuji clapping his hands, which happens in 139. Since it will be a compilation movie, the beginning of Season 2 will likely pick up exactly where it left off, with Yuji fighting the curses on the bridge, which we also can see happening in the teaser trailer. That means his talk with Chozo on the stairs and Naoya's introduction, which we see in chapter 138 before this bridge incident, will either be woven throughout Yuji's fight with the curse spirits in a more flashbacky style, or we will just end up, changing the ending of Season 2 and going straight into the talk with Chozo and the Naoya stuff, and then we'll reach the clapping. That sounds like a cheesy horror movie title. The Clapping. Anyway, now the trailer shows that this Yuji execution mini arc has actually been extended pretty significantly, which leads me to believe episode 1 will cover chapters 138 and 139 and end on the cliffhanger of Yuta pulling up with a superhero landing. The actual fight between Yuta and Yuji seems to have been extended a fair bit too, to the point where curse spirits seem as if they actually interrupt the battle at some point. Them being inside a theater also proves that it's been extended because in the manga it's literally just a 1 and a bit chapter long ordeal that never makes it off the street. Therefore, I think episode 2 will likely cover chapters 140 to 143, which means Yuta will kill Yuji, Chozo will embarrass Naoya, and then Yuta will embarrass Chozo and secure his title as Supreme Aura Farming God. Episode 3 will likely start with Yuji's weird Mumjaku flashback dream thing, and then go all the way up until the end of their debrief with Tengen, which would mean it covers chapters 143 to 146. Now, in the manga, Takuba's introduction actually happens at the end of chapter 146, but I suspect they'll probably move that to later in the series, because it does feel weirdly out of place here. Like, it's so early, and then we just don't see him at all for like another 20-so chapters. Moving on though, episode 4 will probably cover chapters 146 to 148, but it's probably more like 147 to 148 if we assume that the Takuba stuff does get moved over a bit. This episode will start with the death of Principal Yaga at the hands of Principal Gakuganji and this random no-name bum sorcerer who looks hella cool for literally no reason. Yep, that's just the norm for JJK, I guess. You introduce cool new-looking characters and then they just disappear from the face of the earth. Oh, and please, Mappa, I beg you, actually show this fight. Like, I'd love to actually see this fight. I get you need to manage your time and all because the Culling Games is packed with hype moments and aura, but the fact Yaga died off screen never really sat right with me. Although, I guess, like student like master, right? But yeah, I want to see a grade 1 versus grade 1 battle actually happen, but even if there is no fight extension, it will still be peak because my goat Kusakabe will be in this episode, as he is part of the chapter-long Yaga Kusakabe Takaru Cursed Corpse flashback that 99% of JJK readers don't even know exist. Those with the attention span of a deflated, bouncy castle shouldn't worry though, because the remaining 2/3 of episode 4 will likely be dedicated to Maki's defeat at the hands of her father and her iconic awakening in the basement of the Zenin clan HQ. Which of course means that episode 5, the final episode of part 1, if I am not mistaken, will be dedicated to the freshly awakened Maki Zenin completely annihilating her clan. Episode 5 will therefore cover chapters 149 to 152 and be a pretty much combat-only episode. Hopefully Maki vs the Hei Squad, aka the Zenin's strongest fighters, will actually be extended because I want to see more of their techniques and abilities in action, which actually very well could end up being the case because I suspect the giant red hand that can be seen in the teaser trailer actually belongs to Jinichi Zenin, who does make giant hands rain down from the sky. The second half of the episode will therefore be reserved for Maki versus Naoya, and it will end on that fraud Momo arriving to cry over Mai's body. Although, knowing Mappa, I would not be surprised if we actually ended on a neat little Hikari tease as an end credit scene. You know, maybe like an end credit scene of him and Karara sitting watching Yuji and Megumi enter the fight club or something. I already know that I'm going to get comments from a lot of people who don't really know how turning manga into anime works, telling me that there is no way the Zenin massacre can only happen in one episode, but let me tell you right now, it definitely can. For action-heavy episodes, Mappa normally manages to fit around 4 chapters in. I mean, the Sukuna vs Jogo episode, the Sukuna vs Maharaga episode, and the Yuji and Todo vs Mahito episode all managed to fit 4 chapters worth of content, even when there were some moments with a lot of dialogue. But for episodes where there is a more even split between combat and dialogue, which is normally the case in JJK, Mappa usually manages to include 3 to 3 and a bit chapters worth of material. Yeah, see, I told you, I did my research. From the moment Maki actually awakens to the moment she leaves having completed her mission of annihilating her clan, there's actually very little dialogue at all, which not only means that those 4 chapters will easily fit into one episode and have no reason to really fill up any more than that, but there will likely even be room for some fight extensions too, so I do think this is going to be one of the fights that Mappa takes the liberty to massively extend. Now, please do remember before I continue that this is just my estimation and not official information at all, alright? I'm not trying to spread misinformation here, I'm just having a bit of fun. I already know I'm gonna get comments coming for my ass like, oh, why can't you just wait for it to release? Why even make this video? Because I find it fun? Duh. Anyway, let's move on before I, fully crash out. Okay, just quickly before I start breaking down the Culling Games episodes, I'll just tell you what you want to know because some of you, TikTok readers, are very unsure about where Season 3 will end and how many chapters it will actually cover. Well, Season 1 was 24 episodes and covered 64 whole chapters. Season 2 was 23 episodes and covered roughly 73 chapters. Assuming that we do another 23 to 24 episode season, then we will likely end up finishing somewhere between the 212 to 215 mark, which is when the Meguna reveal happens. Ending on chapter 215 with Meguna escaping from Yuji would mean that season 3 covers 78 chapters, which is already more than both season 1 and season 2. But considering season 2 managed to squeeze 73 chapters into 23 episodes, fitting 78 into 24 episodes is definitely doable. What this does mean, however, is that Gojo being unsealed and the iconic Nah-I'd win moment are incredibly unlikely to happen in this season. That would push the chapter count all the way up to 84 chapters, and would need to include Meguna vs Yorozu as a whole fight. So unless they actually extend the amount of episodes they make, and they have absolutely no reason at all to do that, then it's really just not doable. And don't even get me started on the deluded TikTok readers who think Gojo vs Sukuna will happen in season 3. Like honestly, the amount of comments I have gotten recently where people genuinely believe season 3 will include Gojo vs Sukuna is crazy. It is literally impossible to be any earlier than season 4. With that information in mind, I'm now going to jump right back into breaking down the rest of JJK season 3 episode by episode. So yeah, I think Season 3, Part 2 will pick up when the Culling Games arc begins, following the execution and perfect preparation mini-arcs that are shown in the teaser trailer. Which means that the very first thing that we are going to do in Episode 6 of Season 3 is go to recruit Hikari. Episode 6 will probably cover chapters 153 to 156 and include Yuji vs Panda, as well as the beginning of Kurara vs Megumi. The highlight of this episode, though, will definitely be Yuji's undercover conversation with Hikari, because Yuji pretending to not know who the famous Satoru Gojo is, and then Hikari responding by literally chucking a train door at him, is actually peak comedy. The dumbest sorcerer of today versus the dumbest sorcerer in history type shit. Episode 7 will then probably cover chapter 156 to 159, which will include the rest of the Megumi and Panda versus Kurara fight, and I gotta say, I think this fight will be one of the underdogs of the season. It's actually really good, and Kurara's technique is so damn interesting. It's just a shame that she never gets the chance to do literally anything ever again. Well, other than, glaze and hype up Hikari, because, well, she's the only one who's willing to do that. The rest of this episode should also have Hikari demonstrating his, unique martial arts technique on the defenseless Yuji Itadori. After Hikari eventually agrees to help and Megumi debriefs him, the episode will likely end on the reveal of one of the most interesting and popular characters in the entire series. Hajime Kashima. I'm kidding, alright? The episode will end on the reveal of Higuruma Hirumi and the awakening of his Judgment Curse technique. Kashima's intro is still pretty cool though, I can't lie, it does have aura, so I won't hate that much. So yeah, I would expect that episode 6 will be the first time we meet Hikari, and episode 7 will be the first time we meet Higuruma and Kashimo. Probably. Maybe. Episode 8 will then likely cover chapters 160 to 162, which is a very weird one because this includes the weird chapter where Kenjaku invades children's dreams and escorts Yuji's friends to safety, which now that I say out loud is an incredibly weird thing for him to be doing. But this is also the episode where Megumi and Yuji enter Tokyo Colony number 2 and officially become Culling Games players. They will be split up from each other and immediately be faced with some kind of challenge, with Yuji needing to fight the weird helicopter and jet engine hair people. Damn, that's a truly crazy sentence. And Megumi will face his biggest challenge yet, talking to a flirtatious woman. This episode will also probably end on the same cliffhanger that chapter 162 ends on, the reveal of Reggie Star. Which then means that the next episode, episode 9, will easily be one of the best in the entire show. Not just the season, the show. Episode 9 will likely cover chapters 163 to 167, which means the entire episode should be dedicated to Yuji Itadori versus Higuruma Hiromi. Combat isn't really the focus of this fight, it's more about progressing the main character's development, helping us to understand Yuji's feeling about what happened in Shibuya, and it's also incredibly important for Yuji's themes of continuing Gojo's dream by saving Higuruma from the dark path that he had started down. If you want to know more about the deep analysis behind this fight, then go watch this video. This fight will be the last time that we see Yuji Itadori for a very long time, and it is a fan favorite, so I do expect Mappa to really go all out with it, whether it be animation, music, voice acting, whatever. This episode should just get a lot of love, because it is a fan favorite, and for good reason. It is truly incredible. Fun fact for you all though, Yuji Itadori, the main character of the series, will actually end up being in less than 50% of this season. After this peak fiction fight, we deadass do not focus on him again until the last 2 episodes. Also, I think that episode 9 will be a massive turning point in this season. Everything leading up to this moment is great, but once the culling game fights actually begin, it is just non-stop peak, so I suspect this is where most of the budget will be going. I mean, episode 10 will be dedicated to Megumi versus Reggie and his crew, which should include the introduction of characters like Hazanoki and Takaba, as well as an entire mini-fight dedicated to just those two characters. This episode will probably cover chapters 167 to 170 and end once Megumi lures Reggie into the school gym after they've had a little bit of a tussle, where they initially started. It might end on the domain as a cliffhanger, but I think it will end before that because hype moments like domain expansions tend to hit harder and have more impact when you can watch the entire moment in one sitting. Which means that episode 11 will likely cover chapters 170 to 173 and include some of the best and most iconic moments in all of Jujutsu Kaisen, including Megumi's domain expansion, Reggie Star's defeat, and last but not least, the introduction of the Sendai Colony Sorcerers. Yes, I think that the end of episode 11 will probably end with one of my favourite moments in all of JJK. I am of course talking about the page of Yuta Akotsu no diffing Druv, while the narrator states that he is second only to Satoru Gojo. Therefore, episode 12 will be purely dedicated to Yuta versus Sendai Colony, which is possibly the most anticipated fight in all of Season 3. I mean, it's definitely top 3 for sure. Based on how MAPPA manages long fights in the past, I think they'll easily squeeze 4 chapters into episode 12, going from chapter 174 all the way until the end of chapter 177. That means it will include the entire Kurorushi fight, Yuta's first fight and dialogue with Uro, and his fight against one of the coolest characters in the entire story, Ryu Ishigori. Yuta will then take a beating and end the episode by locking in and summoning Rika to his side. And to be honest, I think this will be one of the best cliffhangers of the entire show. Episode 13 will pick up directly after this and cover chapters 178 to 180 or 181, depending on a few things. And yes, this is it. This is that episode. The iconic Sendai Colony 3-way domain clash. The episode will cover the rest of the fight and include the moments like Ryu knocking out Uro, Yuta beating Ryu, and possibly even Yuta having his nice little heart-to-heart with Ryu at the end of the episode. But there is also a good chance that this conversation carries into the beginning of episode 14 if we get some fight extensions, but obviously I can't predict fight extensions or how long they'll be, so I'm just making the most of what we got. That being said, episode 14 will possibly cover chapters 181 to 183, meaning that we will meet the awakened mangaka Charles Bernard and his fight with Kinji Hikari. Now this episode is a weird one. It's kind of hard to figure out because despite being a short fight, the explanation for Hikari's domain and curse technique could genuinely take forever. If MAPPA prioritize efficiency over thoroughness, then they will probably massively simplify the explanation and continue with the assumption that the viewer understands the basic of pachinko, which is fair enough because again it is targeted towards a Japanese audience. I would also put money on one of those classic shonen chibi explanations being used, which just leaves some text on the screen for a bit so that you can pause it and read it if you really want to. Assuming the explanation is simplified, then we will probably make it all the way to Kashimo versus Panda and maybe even Panda's little flashback. But I reckon the chapter will probably end with that admittedly awesome panel of Kashimo no-diffing that bum Panda and asking, "Where is Sukuna?" Which of course means episode 15 will likely cover chapters 184 to 187 and be pretty much all Hikari vs Kashimo focused, with the exception of the first 5 minutes or so, which will likely be dedicated to Panda's boring and completely useless flashback. The rest of the episode will likely include Hikari's awesome superhero landing entrance, the moment where he supposedly dodges lightning, and will probably end partway through 187 or at the end of 186 when Hikari pops his domain expansion. Episode 16 will cover chapters 187 to 190 and will basically just feature the rest of the Hikari vs Kashimo fight and include some of Jujutsu Kaisen's most iconic moments ever, such as turn up the volume because this is a funeral for the living, and the moment where they volley a whole-ass shipping container between each other, as well as Kashimo's mini flashback. Depending on how much MAPPA decide to extend the fight, the episode will probably end on the awesome panel of Maki being declared as a newly awakened monster in chapter 190, but if there is still time, which there very well might be, we could finish even later in chapter 190 and see Noritoshi Kamo, as well as a curse womb Naoya enter Sakurajima Colony. Episode 17 will therefore cover the end of chapter 190 if that doesn't get covered in episode 16, all the way until the end of chapter 194, meaning Kamo's mini flashback conversation with Kenjaku, Maki and Kamo versus Cursed Naoya, and then Kamo stalling out Cursed Naoya while Maki tries to heal from her injuries will all be included within this episode 17. The episode will probably end the same way that chapter 194 does, with a teaser of Daido and Mio, aka Katana Man and Sumo Man, the most useless and plot-convenient characters in the entirety of Jujutsu Kaisen. Episode 18 is therefore pretty self-explanatory, right? It will just be the rest of the Maki vs Naoya fight, including her proper awakening of precognition, Naoya's domain, Naoya's defeat, and then it will end on the iconic page of the narrator saying Maki is now a fighter equal to that of Toji Zenin in chapter 198. Episode 19 will probably be a bit more of a weird one and a little bit less action heavy, and I suspect Mappa might even move a few of these events around, but I can't exactly predict how they will do that, so I'm going to continue with the assumption that everything is chronological. It will likely cover chapters 199 to 201 or 202, in which we see Yuji, Megumi, Hana, and Takaba planning their next moves. Chapter 199 is also the chapter where Sukuna reveals he is the so-called Fallen One that Angel is hunting down. Now, the rest of the episode will therefore be Kenjaku manipulating the United States into sending forces into Japan in order to take sorcerers into custody and use their cursed energy as a source of renewable energy. The episode will either end with Ganesha messing up the US forces to make a point, or it will end with Yuki and Tengen's conversation at the beginning of chapter 202. If they are really efficient, then they might actually even make it to the moment where Kenjaku enters the barrier and confronts Chozo, which of course means episode 20 will cover chapters 202 to 205. Chozo's peak fiction fight against Kenjaku and the moment where he gets motivated by the memory of his brothers will definitely be the highlight of the episode, for sure, but this will also be when we see Kenjaku's intentions for the Culling Games by showing us a visual of what the merger might possibly look like. Not that it really matters because we literally never see it again, but let's not worry about that just yet. The episode might end on Yuki entering the battle, but I actually think it's more likely to end right after she lands her first devastating attack on Kenjaku. Episode 21 will therefore cover chapters 205 to 209 and will basically just be the entire Yuki vs Kenjaku / Yuki and Chozo vs Kenjaku fight. This means it's going to be an episode of straight hands and aura farming, which low-key makes me think it could be a top 3 episode of the season. Well, that is if Mappa really goes all out with it. It might even be the best fight of the season, I'm not gonna lie. It is definitely a worthy candidate for that title, but who knows. We are talking Kenjaku's domain, Yuki refusing to heal, Chozo making Kenjaku's skull cap spin off, minimum Uzumaki, and of course the famous Yuki black hole moment all in one episode. Oh, and I guess shirtless Kenjaku as well. Like, if you're into that, that might be a hype moment. Anyway, now that I think about it, this episode, honestly, it could reach like Sukuna vs Maharaga levels of hype. Episode 22 will probably feature chapters 209 to 211, meaning that we basically do everything in between Yuki vs Kenjaku and the Meguna reveal. So, the US soldiers will engage the sorcerers and cursed spirits in Japan, the main cast will regroup and figure out what rules need to be added in order to save Sumaki, and the episode will probably end on Sumaki entering and then making a rule of her own, leaving both Megumi and the audience wondering just what the hell is actually going on here. Again, yes, I was very generous with how many chapters I gave to each episode, so my estimates may have a 1 episode margin of error. I'm saying this because episode 23 will actually be the last episode, but it might end up being 24 episodes, considering that my estimates can't account for anime-only scenes and fight extensions. But the final episode, whether it be 23 or 24, will probably cover chapters 212 to 215, meaning that we end the season on the Yorozu reveal, which is already crazy, but then follow it up by the Meguna reveal, which is somehow even crazier. The second half of the episode will be dedicated to Yuji and Maki vs Meguna, which might also end up being a top 5 fight of the season if executed correctly, and I reckon it will either end on this panel of Yuji screaming at Meguna as he flies away on Nue, or it will stretch just a little bit further to the beginning of 216 and end with Meguna emerging from the bath. To be honest though, I think the bath chapter would be the perfect place to start season 4 and really set the tone. Either way, this Meguna reveal will be the big cliffhanger at the end of Season 3 in my opinion. Considering how hype the rest of this season is, there's really no need for any Gojo tease or Gojo hype at all. I think it'll be way more impactful if they save that for the final season. I mean, if they did want to make it to Nar-Eyed Win, they would have to squeeze in 6 whole extra chapters. That would mean the bath, Sukuna versus Ryu, Sukuna versus Yorozu, which is like 3 whole chapters in itself, as well as Gojo being unsealed, Gojo talking with Kenjaku and Sukuna, and then finally ending on the Nar-Eyed Win moment. It's literally not possible. That is, unless they extend the series to 25 or 26 episode, which isn't unheard of and definitely possible, but I just don't see why they would have any reason to do that. I think Season 3 is more than enough hype without this moment, and it would be way more impactful if this is how Season 4 started, so I'm pretty sure that is what Mappa is going to choose to do. Anyway, that's it for my entire episode by episode prediction of Season 3. As always, like the video, subscribe to the channel, check out the membership options, and if you disagree with me, write it in the comments very angrily. Thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you in a bit.